And I think this is really important because we're talking about the increase in coups that have happened in Africa, a developing nation and a developing nation with increasingly close ties to our Eastern adversaries, right? Africa has grown closer as a continent to Russia, and they have grown closer to China. They have aligned themselves with the BRICS trading bloc. And this is not the Africa that we so often think of when we think of this foreign, distant place that's jungles and dirt roads, right? This is a developing country with a developing continent with multiple countries that have access to incredible amounts of natural resources. And when we talk about the coups that have occurred in just the last 10 years, they actually draw like a belt across Africa. We're not talking about just this is only happening in Central Africa. This is only happening in Northern Africa. It's actually a belt of countries that essentially connect the Suez Canal all the way across to the Atlantic Ocean, right? And it's an incredible amount of connectivity and continuity across multiple countries where these coups have happened.
Right, yeah. From the Red Sea to the Atlantic Ocean, you could walk, 2,000 kilometers or whatever it is, all the way across countries that have fallen to military dictatorships in the last 10 years.
And these countries, I mean, the ones that we've talked, I mean, Mali is one of these, right? Like Chad is another one of these. These countries that have collapsed, Gabon is one of these countries.
Yeah.
These countries that have collapsed have a history of at least trying to become democratic.
Right.
And then over time, they have, on their own, of their own decision, their own volition, they have moved towards authoritarian regimes, and even now are controlled by authoritarian regimes. And the coups that they're experiencing are one strong man to another strong man.
Right. Right. And, I think what's interesting is oftentimes when people think about resources in Africa, they're not talking about the people. They're talking about the physical resources, the minerals and deposits and rare earth, things that are there. And that's, of course, what China is there for.
And the Belt and Road Initiative that China has.
Yep. But the truth is that, Africa is full of people who could become really capable. And just like you said, if an outside country wanted to actually invest, instead of, just building them roads and taking their resources, they could build their roads and then, like you said, teach the people who were there, provide jobs, provide education. Other outside countries, instead of going in and saying democracy is the best, have exchange programs where they go and, the people from various countries can be educated in the, whatever country it is, gain an education in something that can help back home, and in the process they're getting ideas and broadening their perspectives. And then the trade-off is you have to go back home and take it back. And it's a slow process if you do it that way, right? It's more soft power than hard power, but that creates influence, right? And I think influence is what that's what all governments are doing, whether you do it covertly like Russia does, or you do it overtly. And, I think covertly is generally faster because you're dumping a bunch of money into a very clear message. But overtly, I think, has the potential to have a larger positive impact. And if Africa is positively impacted, if Africa is lifted up, right, that lifts up the rest. I mean, we're on the same earth. It lifts up everybody else. I mean, here's my idealism coming through. Sorry.
Exactly right. I really feel bad because I'm about to take a dump all over your idealism.
Great.
Because the truth is, like, you're right. Influence is a time-intensive and costly endeavor. And that's why every time you consider an influence campaign, right? CIA taught us this. Every time you consider whether or not to invest in influence, you have to be asking yourself, what is the long-term benefit of the influence that you're building? Right. Versus the short-term benefit if you choose to shortcut the influence. Like you just said, right? Covert influence can happen faster and in a shorter period of time. That's why Russia does it. That's why China does it. That's why they use leverage and manipulation to build influence with a strong man leader that gets shit done quickly in their best interest. Right. That's the Eastern way, right? They don't care about the masses. They don't care about the people. They care about the resources that they can extract in as short a period of time and as quickly as possible with a few key decision makers.
Right.
Because unlike the United States, unlike a democracy where the decision makers are voted into power by other real decision makers, right? The constituency is the decision-making body of the United States. That's not the way it is in Africa, right? It's essentially, if you got more guns, if you got more drugs, if you've got more people, if you've got more eggs, you can get people to fight for you.
Yeah.
So then that's what Russia and China bring to the table, right? You give us the gold that you mine with our tools from your mines, and we'll give you more AK-47s, and we'll give you more food, and we'll give you more booze, and we'll get, like, that's honestly how it works. It's still like, no kidding, horse trading.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's no way soft power with a long-term view is ever going to compete with that.
Not in the short term, for sure. But then in the short term, how do you counter the Russian and Chinese influence?
That's where the trick comes. That's where it gets tricky. Because we have now, as the United States, we have regulated and policied ourselves into a corner where we can't condone bribery.
Yep.
We can't condone essentially the way that the world works outside the United States. We've actually policed ourselves into an economic disadvantage. And what are we going to do with that, right? Like 20 years ago, we could pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, we're taking the moral high ground and we're going to represent democracy and freedom for all living people. The thing is, people may want democracy. They may want freedom, but it doesn't matter what the lowest level individual wants in an authoritarian country. If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip or here to see the full podcast episode.
Freedom! So fresh, so new.